I found my husband Thaddeus hunched over his laptop at 3 in the morning for the 7th night in a row. The blue glow of the screen casting shadows across his face that made him look like a stranger I had never met before. When I asked what he was working on, he closed the laptop so fast it almost caught his fingers, and that hollow feeling in my chest that had been growing for weeks suddenly felt like it might swallow me whole. He said it was just work stuff, nothing to worry about, but his eyes would not meet mine, and I knew with every fiber of my being that something was terribly wrong. We had been married for almost 10 years, and in all that time I had never seen him keep secrets from me. Never felt this distance growing between us like a chasm I could not cross no matter how hard I tried. Our anniversary was coming up in 2 weeks, the big one. The one where we had promised each other we would renew our vows on a beach somewhere tropical. But now I wondered if we would even make it that far. The house we had built together suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Every room filled with the ghost of the connection we used to have. I could not eat, could not sleep, could not stop my mind from spinning through every possible explanation for why the man I loved was pulling away from me. My stomach was in constant knots, and I had lost 7 pounds without even trying. My clothes hanging loose on my frame in a way that made my sister ask if I was sick when she came over for coffee last Tuesday. Thaddeus Cornelius Blackwell was not the kind of man who kept secrets. When we met at a charity fundraiser 11 years ago, what drew me to him was not just his unusual storm gray eyes or the way his rare smile could light up an entire room, but the absolute transparency he carried himself with. He was an architect who designed community centers for underserved neighborhoods, pouring his heart into every blueprint. Staying late at the office not because he had to, but because he genuinely cared about creating spaces where families could thrive. His own childhood had been marked by instability, moving from one cramped apartment to another after his father left when he was 7. Watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep them afloat. That experience had shaped him into someone who valued honesty above almost everything else, who believed that secrets were poison to any relationship. He told me once, early in our marriage, that he never wanted our children to grow up the way he did, always wondering what was being hidden from them, always feeling like there were conversations happening just out of earshot. We had 2 kids now, Saskia, who was 8, and Finian, who was 6, and Thaddeus was the kind of father who showed up to every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference without fail. But for the past month, he had been different. Distracted. Distant, checking his phone constantly, and then hiding the screen when I came near, making excuses to leave the house at odd hours. Coming home smelling like perfume that was not mine, a floral scent that was too sweet and cloying, nothing like the subtle jasmine I always wore. I tried to tell myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Thaddeus loved me. We had built a life together that most people only dreamed about. Our home in the suburbs was filled with laughter and the kind of comfortable chaos that comes with raising 2 young children. We had survived job losses and family drama and the death of his mother 2 years ago, and through all of it we had held on to each other like lifelines. But now I found myself doing things I never thought I would do. Things that made me feel sick with shame even as I could not stop myself. I checked his phone when he was in the shower, scrolling through messages that revealed nothing except how careful he was being. I looked through his jacket pockets and found receipts from restaurants I had never heard of. Jewelry stores with purchases that never made it home to me. I drove past his office during lunch and saw him getting into a car with a woman I did not recognize, her hand touching his arm in a way that felt far too familiar. She was tall and elegant, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that swung as she laughed at something he said. The rational part of my brain kept trying to intervene, kept reminding me that Thaddeus was a good man, that there had to be something I was missing. But the fear was louder than reason, and it whispered to me constantly that I was about to lose everything that mattered. The nights were the worst. I would lie awake beside him, listening to his breathing and wondering who he was thinking about. Sometimes I would reach out and touch his shoulder, needing that physical connection, and he would stir and pull me close in his sleep. but even that felt wrong somehow. Like his body was responding out of habit, while his mind and heart were somewhere else entirely. I started having nightmares about finding him with another woman, vivid dreams that left me gasping awake in a cold sweat at 2 or 3 in the morning. In one recurring dream, I walked into his office and found him kissing someone in front of the huge windows that overlooked the city, not even bothering to hide it because I had become so insignificant that my presence did not matter anymore. I would wake from these dreams and go downstairs, sitting in the dark kitchen with my heart pounding, trying to convince myself that I was being irrational. But then morning would come and Thaddeus would be distant again, his mind clearly elsewhere, and all my middle-of-the-night reassurances would crumble. My best friend Ophelia tried to talk sense into me. She came over one afternoon when the kids were at school and found me crying at the kitchen table, surrounded by evidence I had collected like some kind of deranged detective. Credit card statements with charges I did not recognize. Printouts of his calendar showing meetings at times when he had told me he would be somewhere else. Screenshots of text messages that were perfectly innocent on their own but felt suspicious when taken together. Ophelia sat down across from me and took my hands in hers, her green eyes serious and concerned. She told me that I needed to either confront Thaddeus directly or let this go before it destroyed me. That this middle ground I was living in, this constant state of suspicion and surveillance, was toxic for me and for the kids who could definitely sense that something was wrong. She reminded me that Thaddeus had never given me any real reason to doubt him before this, that 10 years of faithful marriage should count for something. But then she also said that my instincts were usually good, and if something felt wrong maybe I should trust that feeling. It was not exactly the clarity I had been hoping for, but I appreciated her honesty. After she left, I made a decision. I would wait until our anniversary. If Thaddeus had not come clean by then, if he was still keeping secrets and avoiding my questions, I would force the conversation even if it meant hearing things I did not want to hear. The morning of our anniversary arrived, gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched the heaviness in my heart. I woke up alone, Thaddeus's side of the bed already cold, and found a note on his pillow written in his distinctive angular handwriting. It said he had an important meeting that could not be rescheduled, but he would be home by noon so we could spend the afternoon together. He signed it with love and drew a little heart, something he had not done in weeks, and that small gesture made my eyes fill with tears. I held that note in my hands and tried to remember the man who used to leave me love notes all the time, tucked into my lunch bag or hidden in my coat pockets. The man who once left a trail of sticky notes all through the house, each one listing something he loved about me, leading me from room to room, until I found him waiting in the bedroom with champagne and roses. Where had that man gone? And who was this stranger who could barely look me in the eye anymore? I stood at the kitchen window watching the rain streak down the glass and wondered if this was how marriages ended, not with explosive fights or dramatic confrontations but with quiet mornings where you realized the person you loved had already left you in every way that mattered. Saskia came downstairs in her pajamas, her dark curls tangled from sleep, and asked why I was crying. I had not even realized I told her it was nothing, just being silly. But she looked at me with those knowing eyes that were so much older than her 8 years and said that Dad had been acting weird lately and she hoped everything was okay. The fact that even our daughter had noticed made everything so much worse. Children are supposed to be protected from adult problems, supposed to live in a world where their parents' love is constant and secure. But here was Saskia, worry creasing her young forehead, asking questions I could not answer. I pulled her into a hug and promised her that everything would be fine, hating myself for potentially lying to her. Finian wandered down a few minutes later, still half asleep, dragging his favorite stuffed elephant behind him. He climbed into my lap and asked if we could have pancakes, blissfully unaware of the tension that had been suffocating our home for weeks. I made them pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, and then called my sister to ask if she could take them for the day. My sister Cordelia arrived an hour later, her arrival announced by the sound of her vintage car backfiring in the driveway. She swept into the house like a whirlwind, her red hair wild from the wind, and took one look at my face before pulling me into a fierce hug. She did not ask questions, just gathered up the kids and their overnight bags, promising them a movie marathon and all the junk food they could eat. Before she left, she turned back and told me to call her if I needed anything at all, and that she was here for me no matter what happened. I watched them drive away, Saskia waving from the back window, and then I sat on the couch and waited for my husband to come home and destroy our life. The house was so quiet without the kids, every creak and groan amplified, the ticking of the clock on the mantel seeming unnaturally loud. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, scrubbing the kitchen counters until they gleamed, but my mind would not stop racing through possibilities. Maybe Thaddeus was going to ask for a divorce. Maybe he had been building up to this for weeks, getting his affairs in order before dropping the bomb. Maybe that woman I saw him with was not just a colleague or a friend, but someone he had fallen in love with. Someone who made him feel things I could not make him feel anymore. The thoughts were relentless, each one more painful than the last. He arrived at noon carrying a large box wrapped in silver paper, his face lit up with an excitement I had not seen in weeks. He was practically vibrating with energy as he set the box down on the coffee table and reached for my hands. And I pulled away because I could not bear for him to touch me right before he broke my heart. The hurt that flashed across his face was so genuine, it almost made me doubt everything I thought I knew. But then I remembered all those late nights and secret phone calls, and I hardened my heart against him. He said my name, Marcelini, in that soft way he had that usually melted me. But this time I just stared at him and asked him to tell me the truth. He looked confused, genuinely puzzled by my coldness, and asked what I was talking about. His storm gray eyes were wide and innocent, his body language open and relaxed, nothing like someone who was about to confess to infidelity. But I could not let myself be fooled by appearances anymore. I told him I knew something was going on, that I had seen the receipts and the late nights and the woman at his office, and I needed him to just be honest with me for once, instead of treating me like I was stupid. My voice was shaking, tears streaming down my face, and I hated how weak I sounded, but I could not help it. The color drained from his face, and for a moment I thought I was going to be sick because this was it. This was the moment where my worst fears were confirmed. I braced myself for the words that would end my marriage. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. But then he did something completely unexpected. He started laughing. Not cruel laughter or the nervous kind that comes when someone is caught, but genuine surprised laughter that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. The sound filled the living room, bouncing off the walls, and I stared at him in complete shock. He said he could not believe this was happening, that all his careful planning had somehow made me think the worst possible thing. He reached for the box and told me to open it, and I said I did not want his guilt presence. Whatever was in there could not make up for what he had done. The anger in my voice surprised even me, sharp and bitter, and I saw him flinch. He stopped laughing then and looked at me with such intensity that I finally met his eyes. And what I saw there was not guilt or shame but something that looked like love mixed with desperation. He said he had never cheated on me, would never cheat on me, that the very idea made him feel physically ill. His voice was thick with emotion, and I could see his hands trembling as he pushed the box toward me. Then he told me to open it because everything would make sense if I would just open the box. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely untie the ribbon, my fingers fumbling with the bow that was tied in an elaborate pattern. When I finally lifted the lid, I found myself staring at something that made absolutely no sense. It was a leather-bound portfolio filled with architectural drawings, dozens of them, showing a house I had never seen before. Thaddeus knelt down beside me as I flipped through the pages, his words tumbling out fast, like he had been holding them in for so long they could not wait any longer. He said that 6 months ago, right after what would have been his mother's 70th birthday, he had started designing our dream house. The one we used to talk about late at night when we first got married. when we were still living in that tiny apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who fought all the time. The one with the big kitchen that opened onto the backyard where we could host family dinners and holiday gatherings. The library with floor-to-ceiling windows where I could read and paint with natural light flooding in. The art studio I had always wanted but never thought we could afford. A dedicated space with proper ventilation and storage for all my supplies. He had been working with a realtor, that woman I had seen him with, whose name was Svetlana Kowalski, and who apparently specialized in rural properties. The late nights were spent finalizing the designs, getting permits approved, meeting with contractors to get quotes and timelines. The jewelry store receipts were for a necklace he had commissioned from a local artisan. A custom piece with our anniversary date, engraved in a spiral pattern that represented the decade we had spent building a life together. The perfume I smelled was from Svetlana, who apparently bathed in some expensive French fragrance. Every secret, every hidden phone call, every mysterious errand had been part of this massive project to give me the anniversary surprise of a lifetime. He pulled out another envelope from his jacket and handed it to me with tears in his eyes, his voice breaking as he explained what it contained. Inside were closing documents for a property about 20 minutes outside the city. 3 acres with a view of the mountains that turned purple at sunset. The land had an old stone wall running through it, remnants of a farm that had existed there 100 years ago, and a natural spring that fed into a small creek. He had purchased it using money from an inheritance his mother had left him, money he had been saving for something special. The construction was set to begin next month, and he had already hired a team of builders he trusted. He showed me photographs of the property taken at different times of day, in different seasons. The land in spring with wildflowers covering every inch, in summer with the creek running full and clear, in fall with the trees ablaze with color. He had been visiting the site regularly, walking the property and imagining where each room of our house would go, picturing our kids playing under those trees and our grandchildren visiting someday in the distant future. He said he knew it was crazy. Knew it was probably too much. But after his mother died he had realized how short life was and he wanted to spend the rest of his building something beautiful with me. I could not speak. I could not breathe. I just sat there holding these drawings that represented months of work and planning and love, trying to reconcile this reality with the one I had constructed in my head over the past few weeks. The portfolio was thick with details, page after page of carefully rendered plans. The main floor with its open concept living space, and the kitchen island I had always dreamed of. The second floor with the master bedroom suite that had a balcony overlooking the mountains, and a bathroom with that deep soaking tub I had mentioned wanting years ago. The basement level that was partially above ground thanks to the slope of the land, with space for a home theater and a guest suite. And attached to the main house but with its own entrance, my art studio with north-facing windows and custom-built storage. Every single element had been chosen with care, designed around the life we had built together, and the dreams we had shared. This was not just a house, it was a love letter written in blueprints and square footage, a physical manifestation of how well he knew me and how much he wanted to make me happy. All those nights I had spent imagining worst-case scenarios, convincing myself that my marriage was falling apart, lying awake and wondering where I had gone wrong. All of it had been me creating monsters in the shadows, letting fear and insecurity turn my husband's love into something ugly and suspicious. I thought about the hours I had wasted checking his phone and following him and collecting evidence of crimes he never committed. I thought about Saskia asking if everything was okay, about how I had pulled away from Thaddeus every time he tried to get close, about all the ways I had punished him for trying to do something beautiful for me. The shame was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on my chest until I thought I might crumble under it. I had doubted him. I had doubted us. I had let my own baggage and insecurities poison something that was pure and good. But then Thaddeus wrapped his arms around me and pulled me close, and I broke down completely, sobbing into his shoulder while he stroked my hair and whispered that it was okay, that he understood, that he was sorry for making me worry. He said he should have found a way to include me instead of trying to make it a surprise. that he had gotten so caught up in the romance of the grand gesture that he had not considered how his behavior might look from the outside. That he had been selfish in his desire to surprise me, thinking only about the moment of revelation and not about the weeks of anxiety leading up to it. We sat there on the floor for a long time, me crying and him holding me, the anniversary box open between us like a bridge back to each other. Eventually I pulled away enough to really look at the drawings, and I saw all the little details he had included that were specifically for me. The window seat in the library, positioned to catch the morning light, because he knew I liked to read with my coffee at dawn. The extra deep bathtub in the master bathroom because I was always complaining that our current one was too small. The separate entrance to my art studio so I could come and go without tracking paint through the house. The mudroom with built-in cubbies for each family member because I was always complaining about the chaos of shoes and backpacks by the front door. The walk-in pantry because I loved to cook and needed proper storage. The covered back porch with a fireplace so we could sit outside even when it was cold. Every room, every detail, every choice reflected conversations we had had over the years. Dreams I had mentioned in passing that he had stored away and remembered. I told him I was sorry, that I should have trusted him, that I had let my fears turn me into someone I did not recognize. He said he was sorry too, that he should have realized how his secretiveness would affect me, especially given how much he valued honesty in our relationship. We both agreed that we had work to do on communication, that this whole situation had revealed cracks in our foundation that needed to be addressed before we could build our dream house. The necklace he had commissioned was even more beautiful than I could have imagined. A delicate silver chain with a pendant that held our anniversary date, worked into an intricate spiral design. The numbers were incorporated so seamlessly into the pattern that you almost did not notice them at first, but once you saw them they were unmistakable. The artisan who made it had included tiny gemstones at key points in the spiral, birthstones for each member of our family. My aquamarine, Thaddeus's garnet, Saskia's peridot, and Finian's topaz. When he fastened it around my neck, his fingers lingered on my skin, and I felt that familiar spark that had been missing for weeks. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through every detail of the house plans, him explaining his choices and me adding my own ideas, talking and laughing like we had not done in far too long. He showed me the materials he had selected, samples of wood and tile and stone. He explained his vision for the landscaping, how he wanted to preserve as many of the existing trees as possible and add native plants that would attract butterflies and birds. He talked about energy efficiency and solar panels and geothermal heating, all the sustainable features he knew I cared about. Every word he spoke revealed how much thought had gone into this project, how it was not just about building a house but about creating a home that reflected our values and our vision for the future. He showed me photos of the property again, this time pointing out specific features I had missed the first time. The clearing where he envisioned the house sitting, elevated slightly to take advantage of the view. The grove of old oak trees that would shade the southern side of the property. The spot by the creek where we could build a small dock and the kids could play in the water during summer. The rise on the eastern edge of the property where we could plant a vegetable garden that would get full sun. He had thought of everything, planned for every possibility, considered every detail, and he had done it all while maintaining his regular work, being present for the kids, keeping up with household responsibilities. The amount of time and energy and love he had poured into this project was staggering. I asked him how he had managed it all, when he had found the time, and he admitted that he had been sleeping less, and working through lunch and sometimes leaving the office early to meet with contractors before coming home. He said it had been exhausting but also exhilarating, like being pregnant with a secret that he could not wait to share. That evening, we picked up Saskia and Finian from my sister's house, and took them out for dinner at their favorite pizza place. The kids were surprised but delighted, especially when Thaddeus told them we had something exciting to share. Over pepperoni pizza and root beer, he pulled out the photos of the property on his phone and told them about the new house. Saskia immediately requested a reading nook in her room, and a door that locked because she wanted privacy, already thinking like the teenager she would someday become. She asked if her room could be painted purple, and if she could have built-in bookshelves like Belle. From Beauty and the Beast, Finian wanted a slide from his bedroom window to the yard, which was definitely not going to happen, but we appreciated his creativity. He also wanted a treehouse and a tire swing and a place to keep bugs. Thaddeus listened to each request seriously, making notes on his phone, treating their ideas with the same respect he would give to any client. He showed them where their rooms would be in the plans. Let them imagine themselves living in this house that did not exist yet but soon would. Watching him with our kids, seeing the way he engaged with their ideas and made them feel heard, reminded me why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. He was a good man, a good father, a good husband, and I had almost let my insecurities destroy the best thing in my life. Cordelia called me later that night after the kids were in bed, demanding to know what had happened. I told her everything, about the house and the necklace and how spectacularly wrong I had been about everything. She laughed and said she was relieved, but also that my reaction had been completely understandable given the circumstances. She reminded me that Thaddeus had been acting suspicious by any objective measure, that my fears had not been completely unfounded even if they were ultimately wrong. But she also said that this was a good thing, that almost losing something makes you appreciate it more, that this scare might actually make my marriage stronger in the long run. I hoped she was right. I wanted to believe that we could take this experience and use it to build something better, something more solid. But I also knew that it would require work, that we could not just brush this under the rug and pretend it never happened. The next morning, Thaddeus and I sat down with coffee and had a long, honest conversation about everything that had happened. I told him about the nightmares I had been having, about the weight I had lost, about the panic attacks I had experienced when he came home late. I described in detail how his behavior had looked from my perspective, how each innocent action had added up to create a picture of infidelity in my mind. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more and more stricken as he realized the extent of my suffering. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, just holding my hand and processing everything I had said. Then he told me that he was sorry, truly sorry, that he had been so focused on the surprise that he had failed to see what it was costing me. He said that going forward, we needed to have better communication, even if it meant ruining surprises. That no gift or gesture was worth the pain I had experienced over the past month. I agreed, but I also took responsibility for my part in this. I explained how my parents' divorce had left me with trust issues I had never fully dealt with, how watching my mother's heartbreak had created a template in my mind for how relationships end. I told him about the voice in my head that constantly whispered that I was not enough, that someday he would wake up and realize he could do better. Thaddeus was shocked by this revelation, had no idea that I carried these fears around with me. He asked why I had never told him before, and I admitted that I had been ashamed, had thought I could just push through it on my own. We both realized in that moment that we needed outside help, that this was bigger than we could handle alone. We started marriage counseling the following week. Our therapist, a warm woman named Dr. Shomera Chen, helped us unpack the layers of miscommunication and unspoken fears that had accumulated over 10 years of marriage. In our sessions, I learned that my trust issues were not just about my parents but also about my own self-worth, about believing deep down that I did not deserve happiness and therefore was always waiting for it to be taken away. Thaddeus learned that his need to control situations and create perfect surprises came from feeling powerless as a child, from watching his mother struggle and being unable to help, from wanting to prove he could provide in ways his father never did. We both learned that love is not enough if you cannot communicate. If you cannot be vulnerable with each other about your fears and insecurities. Dr. Chen gave us tools for better communication, ways to check in with each other regularly about our emotional states, strategies for managing anxiety and building trust. It was hard work, sometimes painful work, but it was also necessary work. The construction process became a kind of therapy in itself. Thaddeus took us to the site every weekend, even when there was not much to see beyond excavation and foundation work. We would walk the property together, the kids running ahead, while Thaddeus and I talked about the future. We made decisions together, from big things like the exact placement of the house on the land, to small things like what kind of doorknobs to use. He included me in every choice, asked for my opinion on everything, made sure I felt like a full partner in creating this home. I started painting again, something I had given up when the kids were babies and time became a luxury I could not afford. My art studio in the new house would not be ready for months, but I set up a small workspace in the corner of our bedroom and began creating again. I painted the property in different seasons based on Thaddeus's photographs. I painted portraits of our kids playing in the imagined yard. I painted the house itself, bringing to life the blueprints and elevations Thaddeus had drawn. Each painting was a way of processing my emotions, of working through the fear and guilt and hope that swirled inside me. The construction took 8 months instead of the projected 6 because of weather delays and permit issues. There was a week in March when it rained so much the site became a mud pit and no work could be done. There was a problem with the foundation that required bringing in a structural engineer and redesigning part of the basement. There was a delay in getting the custom windows that Thaddeus had ordered from a manufacturer in Oregon. Each setback tested our patience but also gave us more time to prepare, to finish up things at our old house, to help the kids adjust to the idea of moving. Saskia went through a phase where she was resistant to leaving her school and her friends, worried about starting over somewhere new even though we assured her we would still be in the same school district. Finian was mostly excited but had moments of anxiety about leaving the only home he had ever known. We took them to child therapist recommended by Dr. Chen, making sure they had support through this major transition. As the house took shape, it became more real to all of us. The day the framing went up and we could actually walk through the rooms, seeing the spaces that had only existed on paper, was magical. Saskia ran from room to room claiming her bedroom and testing out where her furniture would go. Finian was fascinated by the construction equipment and spent the whole visit asking the foreman questions about how everything worked. Thaddeus and I stood in what would become our bedroom, looking out at the view of the mountains through the opening where the window would be installed, and he pulled me close and whispered that this was all for me. All for us, all for the life we were going to build here. I believed him in a way I had not been able to believe anything during those dark weeks before our anniversary. The house was proof of his love, solid and tangible, something I could walk through and touch. We hired movers but did a lot of the packing ourselves, each box a chance to sort through our accumulated possessions and decide what came with us to the new life. I found love notes Thaddeus had written me years ago, tucked into books and drawers, forgotten evidence of his devotion. I found photographs from our wedding, both of us so young and full of hope, not knowing all the challenges we would face but ready to face them together. I found the kids' baby clothes, tiny onesies and sleepers that seemed impossible when I thought about how big they were now. Each item had a memory attached, and packing felt like reviewing our whole life together. Some things we donated or threw away, letting go of the past to make room for the future. Other things we packed carefully, treasures we wanted to carry forward into the next chapter. The day we moved into the house was unseasonably warm for November, the kind of perfect fall day where the sky is impossibly blue and the air smells like wood smoke and possibility. Thaddeus carried me over the threshold like we were newlyweds, the kids cheering behind us, and I felt something shift inside my chest. This house was not just walls and rooms in carefully chosen paint colors. It was a second chance, a fresh start, a physical reminder that even when we stumble, we can find our way back to each other. The movers brought in our furniture and boxes, and we spent the day unpacking and arranging, making this new space feel like home. By evening, we were exhausted but happy, surrounded by half-empty boxes and furniture that needed to find its final placement. We ordered takeout and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room. the kids talking excitedly about their new rooms and the adventures they would have on the property. That night after the kids were asleep in their new rooms, Thaddeus and I stood on the back porch watching the stars come out, and he asked me if I was happy. I told him I was happier than I had ever been, that almost losing him had taught me not to take any of this for granted. He pulled me close and said that the fear in my eyes during those weeks before our anniversary had nearly killed him. That watching me doubt him had been the hardest thing he had ever experienced. But he also said it had made him a better husband, more aware of how his actions affected me, more intentional about showing up and being present instead of assuming I just knew how he felt. In the weeks and months that followed, we settled into our new home and our new patterns. I spent hours in my art studio, finally having the space and time to pursue the passion I had set aside for so many years. I started selling my paintings at a local gallery, surprised and delighted when people actually wanted to buy them. Thaddeus continued his work designing community centers, but also took on some private residential projects, using what he had learned building our house to help other families create their dream homes. The kids flourished in the new space, Saskia spending hours in her reading nook and Finian building elaborate forts in the woods behind the house. We made friends with our neighbors, other families, who had chosen to live a bit outside the city for the space and the nature. We hosted dinner parties and holiday gatherings, finally having the room to bring everyone together. The house filled with life and laughter and love, becoming exactly what Thaddeus had envisioned when he first started drawing those plans. Looking back now, a year after we moved into this house that love built, I can see how close we came to disaster. How easy it would have been to let suspicion and fear drive a permanent wedge between us. How many couples probably do exactly that, letting misunderstandings grow until they become insurmountable. But we chose differently. We chose to fight for each other, to do the hard work of unpacking our trauma and learning better patterns. The house itself has become a character in our family story, a constant reminder of both the surprise that almost went wrong and the commitment we made to each other in the aftermath. When Saskia gets older and asks me about marriage, about how to make love last, I will tell her about that terrible, beautiful anniversary when I thought I was losing everything and instead discovered that what I had was stronger than I ever imagined. I will tell her that love requires trust, but that trust requires communication. That you have to be willing to be vulnerable and honest even when it is scary. I will tell her that everyone brings baggage into a relationship, and that part of growing together is unpacking that baggage and healing those old wounds. I will tell her that sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that teach you the most, that transform you and make you stronger if you are willing to lean into the discomfort instead of running away. Dr. Chen told us in one of our last sessions that what we had experienced was actually quite common, that many couples go through periods of doubt and disconnection. She said that the fact we had chosen to work through it, instead of giving up, was what mattered, that we had used a crisis as an opportunity for growth instead of letting it destroy us. She reminded us that marriage is not a destination but a journey, that we would face other challenges in the years to come, and that the skills we had developed would serve us well. We graduated from therapy after 6 months but agreed to check in with her annually, viewing it as preventive maintenance for our relationship. We also committed to regular date nights, to weekly check-ins where we talked about our emotional states, to being intentional about our connection instead of taking it for granted. These practices have become woven into the fabric of our daily life, as natural as breathing, as essential as water. So if you are watching this from somewhere in the world where you are struggling in your relationship, where fear is louder than trust, I want you to know that it is possible to find your way back. It requires honesty and vulnerability, and probably some professional help. It requires being willing to look at your own baggage and how it shapes the way you see the person you love. It requires grace for yourself and for your partner when you inevitably mess up. But it is possible. Love is possible. Building something that lasts is possible. Sometimes the thing you fear the most, the moment where everything seems to be falling apart, is actually the catalyst that makes everything stronger. Sometimes the secret that threatens to destroy you is actually the gift that saves you. I am sharing this story not because it is unique, but because it is universal. Because I know there are people out there right now going through what I went through, convinced that their worst fears are true, unable to see past the fear to the love that is still there waiting to be rediscovered. If this story resonates with you, if it touches something in your heart, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about real people working through real problems and finding their way to the other side, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Your support means everything and helps me keep sharing these moments of hope and redemption with others who might need to hear them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember that even in your darkest moments, there is always a possibility for light.